mentioned this to you in our pre-show walkthrough. We've had neurotheologians on, and one of the theologians, Jim Wilder, fascinating man, said to me, he goes, our brains are so attuned to status. He said it takes our brain 1/40th of a second to determine gender. He said, I can tell if you're a man or a woman in 1/40th of a second. He goes, but it's 1/400th of a second. Yeah. Well, no, I mean, yeah.
Sorry.
when you first see them.
Sorry.
But he said, but it's 1/400th of a second to determine status before gender.
Wow.
And how other people think. So this is really showing that the Bible has already talked about these things. We've just gone about stripping it down, not understanding the social dimensions and the social context and the relationships that have been at work. Now, we do have them operative in our culture today. We just don't necessarily always see the scriptures talk about it. And you brought that back in. So let's define some of these terms, because some people may not be familiar with what we're talking about. It seems so foreign. You mentioned honor shame, or people think of honor killings. They think of this kind of thing. How are we in an honor shame culture today? Well, our modern cancel culture is very much that honor shame idea. So take us back into the world of the New Testament so that we might understand the social context in which this honor, and we'll talk about honor. I do want to talk about all four of these: honor, patronage, kinship, and purity. But let's start off with honor. Describe that to us, the social context.
So it's something that starts with upbringing, a way in which, and this happens in every culture, in every group, society shapes the people that are going to continue to embody its values in one way or another. And across the Mediterranean, people are being shaped from birth to think about the way others regard them, to desire to be the sort of person that will be valued by others because one has embodied what others deem valuable. So really, the quest for honor, being raised to want to be seen as honorable, is very directly and very efficient, a very efficient way for a society to create the kind of people that are going to live out that society's values, because they want to be seen as possessing those values so that they will have worth in the eyes of their peers. And then by the same token, the flip side is they do not wish to be seen as deficient in some fashion, because they are unable to live out particular values, or they are unable to maintain certain practices. So, we talk these days about having face or losing face, gaining honor, losing honor. I don't see the word face used as much in the first century as it is in later settings. But essentially, you have people who are very much oriented not to affirm their self-esteem, no matter what others think about them, but to find their worth in what others affirm about them. And in the first century Greco-Roman world, it's rather complicated. If you belong to a group whose values are different from those of a majority of the population. So a great example is to think about how you live as a Jew in the Greco-Roman world. Because we share some values, with our neighbors, we share the value of piety. But the way we express it is a way that runs counter to the way all the nations around us recognize piety. And in fact, the way we practice piety looks like atheism to them, because we deny the existence of any God but our own. How are we going to continue to observe our covenant with this one God when it brings us really disdain in the eyes of many of the people around us? Put yourself in the diaspora, it's even worse, because the people around you are not around the nation of Judea, but they're around the blocks where you live and what have you. So these groups have to develop strategies for thinking about whose opinion counts. In whose eyes should I seek honor? The eyes of God, reflected in the eyes of other pious Jews who are committed to the covenant. Or if I don't make that decision, I decide I really want, I want the recognition of those in power in the city of Alexandria, where I live, or what have you. And they would therefore be tempted to move out the value of piety very differently. And the family they grew up in will call them apostate, and will shame them, and will cut themselves off from them because they have left behind the values of this group. But they have decided they want honor in the eyes of another group. So this is a bit rambling, I apologize, but it's important to understand from the beginning, the first century world is not a monolithic world when it comes to what is honorable, what is disgraceful. It's a world of conflicting definitions. And the only constant is that most people are concerned to have a group of significant others reflect to them their value. The flip side of that is, with a group like the Jewish community or the fledgling early church or any Greco-Roman philosophical school, it becomes more important to think about how you socially reinforce one another's commitment to those, we'll just say, deviant values or deviant ways of fulfilling those values. And so you think very consciously, very energetically about how a group of 30 people in Ephesus can reaffirm for one another that they are living in exactly the way that the only God that exists wants them to live, when they're surrounded by 150,000 other people who think they're wrong. And all of these dynamics come into play when you think about how honor, how disgrace, how social dynamics overlap with practice and allegiance and religious commitments and other sorts of social commitments in the ancient world.
Let me bring this into contemporary society. You've done an excellent job. But I'm trying to help our people grab a hold of this, because I know some are saying, going, you lost me. I don't get it. So I would say it's like sitting around and you see these mothers that are in their 50s talking to one another going, my son's going to Princeton, or he's becoming a doctor. And that child then is embodying the value that has been placed upon them and is seen to be the most successful in that cultural place. Now, what we've seen, though, today is as you mentioned, and I love how you just described this, it wasn't monolithic. And in our society today, especially here in the West, we have so many different competing values. I mean, there are some overarching ones: individualism, accomplishment, success. But even our definitions of success have become very shifted. I've cited this before. There was a study done in 1964 on American youth, on the values that they possessed. And number 2 was like being a part of the community, like a valuable citizen. Fame, there were 16 items. I think it was either 15 or 16 on the list. Fast forward to today, those have flip-flopped. Community engagement is very low and fame is high. And because of that, as you mentioned before, and I think of my own children, the successful people to them are the people that get hits, that get money, that get attention, that make videos, that are in front of them in the celebrity. Therefore, those people are embodying it, and we deem successful, or my children oftentimes deem successful, those people who have begot that fame and that are embodying that. To live differently in the way that we desire to live as a family, according to the Word of God, is not deemed to be valuable in their greater community.
All right.
And so we're seeing this played out. I mean, even just the other day, my son and I got into this argument over, he's 13. He wanted to do his sleepover on a Saturday night. And the rule is we go to church on Sunday morning. And he's like, can't we just miss? No, we can't. And he goes, none of my friends are doing it. This is the issue. We're embodying a value, and we adhere to a value that they do not. And I'm not trying to shame them, because I want them to come to the one true God.
Yeah.
but at the same time, these are just in a small way, right? Illustrating this kind of idea of the social values that we have in our culture today. And for them, they had to make that figure out. And I know you've written on this. You wrote the commentary on a commentary, not the commentary, but you might like to think.
Well, I like to think of it as the
like
commentary. No,
but so I didn't realize this. The church in Ephesus was only about 30 people.
no, I just threw that figure out. But
man, you had me going. I'm like, I didn't know this.
House churches had to fit in the houses,
That's
right?
true. Okay.
And early on, maybe we should only think about a couple of houses hosting 15 to 30 people each as the church in Ephesus. Of course, it would grow over time. Those house churches would multiply, but the early Christian movement was a small movement for the whole of the first century.